Can pride be so powerful that it makes a basketball legend choose misery over championships? Can ego override every competitive instinct that's supposed to define greatness? Kevin Durant just gave us the answer. And honestly, it's more revealing about who he really is than any championship ring ever could be. Hey, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're unpacking one of the most baffling decisions in recent NBA history. A choice that has nothing to do with basketball strategy, team chemistry, or competitive advantage, and everything to do with hurt feelings and wounded pride. Kevin Durant had a golden ticket back to championship contention sitting right in front of him, and he crumpled it up and threw it away. Let's talk about why. Cast your mind back to February of this year. The Phoenix Suns were imploding in spectacular fashion, a dysfunctional mess of overpriced talent, coaching chaos, and organizational dysfunction. Meanwhile, the Golden State Warriors, despite their own struggles, still represented a legitimate path back to title contention, especially with the addition of a player of Durant's caliber. When rumors started swirling that the Warriors were actively working on bringing Kevin Durant back to the Bay Area, the basketball world collectively nodded and said, yeah, that tracks. It made sense from every conceivable angle. Durant would escape the sinking ship in Phoenix. He'd reunite with Stephen Curry, a player he's repeatedly praised and clearly respects. He'd slot into a system he knows intimately, with a coach who understands how to maximize his talents, surrounded by an organization that's proven it can win championships. This wasn't some speculative fantasy cooked up by bored media members. This was real. Negotiations were happening. Frameworks were being discussed. A deal was within reach. And then Kevin Durant said no. Not because the basketball fit was wrong. Not because he had concerns about the roster construction. Not because he doubted Golden State's championship potential. He said no because his feelings were hurt. In a revealing interview with Sports Illustrated, Durant finally explained his reasoning, and honestly, it's one of the most stunningly petty explanations you'll ever hear from a player of his stature. I love Steph. Durant began, which is important context. This wasn't about his relationship with Curry or any lingering animosity from his previous departure. And I really thought about going back to the Warriors. But it was a certain part of me that just didn't like that this last little phase of my career was going to be that these owners were just going to work behind my back to make that decision for me. Let's pause right there and process what he's actually saying. Durant is admitting that he seriously considered the move. He acknowledges it made basketball sense. But he couldn't get past the fact that the Warriors and Suns were having preliminary discussions without immediately looping him in. He continued, I didn't like that part of it, and I felt like I worked my way up in this league and put a lot of sweat equity into my name and my game, or the respect or the brand that I've created. So you doing business behind my back, backdoor s asterisk 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 like that. So I just wanted to wash my hands of both of those teams, the Warriors and the Suns, because I didn't like how they did business. There it is, the real reason. Not basketball, not winning, not legacy. Hurt feelings over not being consulted early enough in trade discussions. Let's be absolutely clear about something. Kevin Durant had every right to have input on where he wanted to be traded. Players of his caliber and accomplishment have earned that privilege. No one is disputing that. But here's what makes the situation so bewildering. Durant is claiming to be insulted by standard NBA business practices. Teams explore trade possibilities all the time. They have preliminary conversations. They gauge interest and assess feasibility before bringing players into the discussion. That's not disrespect. That's how professional sports organizations operate. The Warriors eventually did come to Durant when a deal was close, asking if he wanted to return. They showed him the respect he claims to value so highly. But by that point, Durant was already in his feelings about how the process had unfolded, and no amount of transparency could undo his wounded pride. Think about the implications of what he's saying. He's admitting that he would rather stay on a dysfunctional, non-competitive team, a franchise that was clearly headed nowhere fast, than swallow his pride and accept a reunion that could have resulted in another championship. For a player who constantly talks about winning, who claims his legacy is defined by titles, who left Oklahoma City specifically to chase rings in Golden State, this decision reveals something fundamental. When push comes to shove, Kevin Durant's ego matters more than his competitive drive. Remember, this wasn't just any season for the Suns. This was a complete organizational disaster. The team was underperforming. The chemistry was toxic. The coaching situation was unstable. Every indication pointed toward a franchise in crisis with no clear path back to contention. Durant had a lifeline. He had an escape route that would have taken him from basketball purgatory straight back to championship contention, and he turned it down because he felt disrespected by how the adults in the room were conducting business negotiations. Meanwhile, the Warriors, despite their own challenges, still had Stephen Curry playing at an elite level. They still had a championship infrastructure. They still had Steve Kerr, one of the best coaches in the league. Adding Durant to that mix would have instantly made them dangerous again. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that Kevin Durant's feelings were hurt, and no amount of basketball logic could overcome that emotional response. If you can't beat them, join them. Irony here's what makes this situation particularly rich with irony. Durant is the same player who took endless criticism for joining the Warriors in 2016 after they beat him in the Western Conference Finals. The entire basketball world roasted him for taking the easiest path to a championship, for abandoning competitive integrity in favor of guaranteed rings. And you know what? He didn't care. He joined Golden State anyway, won 2 championships, and defended that decision repeatedly over the years. When it came to winning titles, Durant was perfectly willing to ignore public criticism and do whatever it took. But when it came to feeling respected during trade negotiations, suddenly, principles mattered more than championships. Suddenly, the process was more important than the outcome. Suddenly, pride trumped pragmatism. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Durant will join a 73-win team after they beat him, but he won't return to that same team years later because preliminary trade discussions happened without his immediate involvement. Make it make sense. What this reveals about Durant's priorities this decision, and more importantly Durant's explanation for it, tells us something crucial about who he is as a competitor and as a person. For all the talk about winning and legacy and championships, Kevin Durant's primary concern is how he's perceived and treated. His ego requires constant validation, constant deference, constant acknowledgement of his status. That's not necessarily a character flaw. Lots of elite athletes have massive egos. It's often part of what drives them to greatness. But it does contradict the narrative Durant has spent years trying to construct about himself as someone who's purely focused on winning basketball games. If winning was truly the priority, he would have jumped at the chance to reunite with the Warriors. He would have recognized that the process of getting there mattered far less than the opportunity itself. He would have put his ego aside and made the basketball decision. Instead, he chose to stay in Phoenix, watching the playoffs from home, because he felt disrespected by how trade negotiations were conducted. That's a choice, and it's a revealing one. The Warriors dodged a bullet. Here's the uncomfortable truth that Warriors fans might not want to acknowledge, but should probably consider. Maybe Golden State dodged a bullet here. If Durant is this sensitive about trade negotiations, if his ego requires this level of constant management and validation, would bringing him back have been worth the headache? The Warriors have built a culture around selflessness, team basketball, and organizational stability. Durant's explanation for turning down the reunion suggests he would have brought drama and ego management challenges that might have undermined everything that makes Golden State successful. Sometimes the best trades are the ones that don't happen. Sometimes saying no is the smartest decision, even if you're not the one making it. When Kevin Durant's career is over and we're assessing his legacy, this decision will be a footnote, but it's a revealing one. It's evidence that for all his talent, for all his scoring ability, for all his championships, Durant's career has been defined as much by his sensitivity and need for validation as by his on-court brilliance. He's one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. He's a champion, He's a future Hall of Famer, but he's also the guy who turned down a chance at another ring because his feelings were hurt during trade negotiations. That's the legacy. That's what people will remember alongside the accolades and achievements. At the end of the day, Kevin Durant made his choice, and he has to live with it. He chose pride over pragmatism, ego over opportunity, feelings over championships. That's his prerogative, and no one can take that away from him. But let's not pretend this was some principled stand or some noble decision based on basketball considerations. This was pettiness, pure and simple. And it cost him a legitimate shot at adding to his championship resume. The question is, will he look back on this moment with regret, or will he convince himself that standing on principle was worth more than another ring? Only time will tell. Your turn to weigh in, all right, I need your honest take on this situation. Was Durant justified in feeling disrespected? Or is this the most absurd reason to turn down a championship opportunity you've ever heard? Would you have made the same choice, or would you have swallowed your pride and gone back to Golden State? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of debate that reveals how differently we all think about competition, ego, and legacy. And if you found this breakdown as fascinating as I did putting it together, hit that like button, and let's keep exploring the psychology behind these massive NBA decisions. There's always more to these stories than meets the eye. Catch you next time.